Hello and welcome to Truthloader in the latest of our series of live interviews, interviews with inspirational people, inspirational thinkers, and this week we've had a number already, but today I'm very excited to say that we are joined on a Google Hangout with Yuttadhammo, who is a Buddhist monk and a meditator. He is very prolific on social media. He's got his own YouTube channel. He's got more than 30,000 subscribers. He's racked up, I think, more than 5 million hits so far on all his videos. He's got Twitter, his Google+, a wide social media platform. So welcome to you, Yuttadhammo. And first of all, can you just give us a brief overview of your early life and how you got into Buddhism?
So it's one of the first things people want to know. My early life and how I got interested in Buddhism. Well, I always had kind of a fascination or obsession even with things like death and suffering. It's kind of a theme that runs for people who are interested in Buddhism. It's not a death wish or anything, but it's this sense that it's a realization that death is inevitable. And kind of an unsettled feeling of why, what does this? Why is it that we have to get old, sick, and die? And what's the meaning of life? I remember when I was about 11 or so. I don't know, 10 or so. I looked over at my mother. I was sitting down in our living room, and I looked over at my mother, and I said to myself, "She's going to die one day." And you can imagine how hard that hit me. And then I thought about all my family and how they were going to all one day not be there. It's something that shakes you up. I think this first realization that the future's not all rosy. And so this is the sort of thing that sends people on this spiritual quest, I think. It's what sent me on the spiritual quest. And later when I learned about the Buddha, I realized it's what sent him on the spiritual quest. Trying to find something to transcend this seemingly awful truth that eventually we're going to be alone. All the people we love and hold dear are going to leave us. And so I always look back at that as sort of the impetus for the next 10 years or so that led me closer to Buddhism. I ended up picking up Taoist teachings and identifying myself as a practicing Taoist, though I wasn't really clear what that meant. I would read the books and try to understand what it meant to be spiritually enlightened. And eventually I made my way to Thailand. I was always joking with people that I was going to go find the Dalai Lama, but I didn't know who he was, and I was going to become a monk. And eventually I made it to Thailand and just jumped into a meditation course. I was just puttering around in Thailand, and then I got on a bus and headed off to a nearby meditation center, spent a month there, and it changed my life. There was no going back after that. That was really the start. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry to go in there. So what is the typical daily life of a Buddhist monk at the moment?
I may be the wrong person to ask that. I don't live a very typical Buddhist monastic life, although I'm clear about what it generally entails. So if you're in a traditional Buddhist monastery, you'd be getting up, well, you sleep maybe 4 hours, 6 hours, and you get up at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and then there's usually some kind of group activity. There'll be group chanting and meditation. At my monastery, it's actually quite good. They do daily morning and evening chanting. This is the monastery where I was ordained and where I kind of grew up as a monk. So 4:30 we get together, do chanting, and then there's group meditation, and after that you'll have a little bit of rice soup for breakfast. And then you'll head out for alms round and walk through the village barefoot, which was always one of my favorite activities. Just interacting with the people and seeing how supportive they were and watching their spiritual practice in terms of being generous and and making aspirations for themselves by giving whatever little bit of food they had. Then you'd come back to the monastery and you'd eat your main meal of the day. And for me, I would spend some of the time meditating, but also some of the time teaching. I was getting involved from very near the beginning. I was getting involved in helping to instruct other meditators and helping or learning more about how to help and how to spread the teachings. But nowadays my schedule is similar, but instead of the alms round, I'm a lot more involved in online activities. So I'm answering questions online and doing videos and that sort of thing.
Tell us a bit more about that online presence, because obviously that's something that I've looked at before we were talking today, and there's a lot of content on your channel. You know, you've got the monk radio, but you've also got the kind of guides to meditation, and then, you know, also why you should meditate. Could you tell us why meditation, in your opinion, is such an important thing?
Oh, well, I mean, simply put, in a nutshell, it's like cleaning your body. We spend so much time worrying about our physical cleanliness, physical health, the well-being, and the amount of money and effort and time and energy that's put into keeping our bodies well maintained. It's a huge imbalance with the neglect compared to the neglect that we see in regards to the mind. How quick we are to throw rubbish and garbage and to destroy our mental well-being. We never think about how our mind, how the state of our minds. So meditation is the counterpart to physical well-being. If you're not practicing meditation, what are you doing to keep your mind clear and focused and organized and pure? We have, the neglect where our minds are generally in chaos. We have no idea of the state of our minds because we never go in there and look. So it's incredible.
So you're saying that meditation is something that should be inherent in everyone's sort of routine, if you like?
Absolutely, it's essential. In Buddhism, we often say it's our duty as human beings. It's one of the only things that we really have an obligation to do. It's not Buddhist, it's not religious, it's just something that very much should be a part of it. Anyone who's doing it is neglectful, is negligent. That's the opinion.
And when you meditate yourself through the day, can you explain to us sort of what happens in that process?
Well, the meditation I practice is kind of, or we practice is kind of unique and not what most people would think of when they think of meditation, but it really is the most simple and direct sort of meditation there is, because you're not meditating on an external object or a concept or anything spiritual. You're meditating on that which is there in that moment. So if you sit down and you have some kind of pain, you sit down, you have pain in your back, well then you'd meditate on the pain in your back. If you find yourself thinking about the past, then you'd apply your awareness to that thought and try to understand what's going on and what are your emotions involved with that thought and involved with that experience. If you're walking, you would meditate on the fact that you're on the movements of the walking, the right foot moving, left foot moving, and the technique is just to remind yourself of what you're doing. Keep your mind as close and as clear and as directly aware of exactly what you're doing. So when you're walking, you'll just remind yourself, walking. When you step with the right foot, you can say to yourself, right. When you step with the left. When you feel pain, you just remind yourself in your mind, pain. It's kind of like a mantra, but you're not focused on something spiritual. You're focused on what's right there, and it keeps your mind directly aware and kind of, you could say, on a one-to-one basis. So instead of the pain arises and you think a million things about it. It's bad, it's a problem, it's going to cause injury, it's something I have to fix, it's this and this and the other thing. Thinking about the causes, thinking about the effects, past and future. It becomes, you simplify it completely down to its pain. And so you get rid of all the bad thoughts that you might have about it, and with good things you get rid of all the addictions and obsessions you have with it, and you just experience it as it is. This is what I mean by purifying the mind or cleaning the mind, because when you do that, your mind is free from all of this garbage, all of this proliferation, and you just be. You're here and now. You're with reality.
So can I ask, sort of, when you meditated this morning, what were you thinking about in that moment?
This morning, well, I had a pain in the back actually, so
okay.
Thinking about that.
And what happened? Is it still there?
Well, see, this is the thing. We're not trying to get rid of the pain. Pain isn't the problem. The problem is your proliferation. What's wrong with pain? What is the problem with pain? There's nothing inherently negative about it. We just have this idea that there's something wrong. And so we learn to separate the pain and the disliking and the worry and the rationalization, or the thinking about what is the cause and what is the effect and so on. But get rid of all that. Pain is pain. And when you can get to that, you can live with pain forever. Because you can't get rid of all your pains, right? It's not magic. And so this is the kind of thing that therefore makes you invincible. Because there's this ancient Buddhist saying that if the earth is covered in glass, you've got two options. One, you can cover the earth in leather, or two, you can wear sandals. And so this is the latter. It's solving your own problem, not the problem with the experience, right? So you could have pain and be in deadly pain, and still be happy, still be at peace, even with the pain.
So what would you say to anyone who sort of is watching this, who is kind of aware of Buddhism, the ideals, and sort of what happens? I mean, what would you say to anyone who just said, I don't believe this does anything good, I don't believe it works, I don't believe in meditation? I mean, you must get those kind of questions, and what would be your response?
Yeah, you get a lot of people who have different ideas of meditation. They think it's weird to have this mantra or this reminder. They think meditation is just kind of sitting there and waiting for something to happen. You sit down and somehow you get calm, and somehow you get peaceful, and also somehow you become enlightened, kind of like it just grows on you. That's difficult because it's so much more comfortable to do that. It's comfortable just to sit and be at peace with yourself. But well, we say, come and see. You can compare what the active sort of effortful work that goes into actually cultivating wholesomeness, cultivating goodness in your mind, where you try to increase your effort, increase your concentration, increase your confidence and your wisdom, where you're actually working to straighten your mind. So we have this concept that the mind is crooked, right? And meditation is this thing that straightens the mind. By crooked, it's all this proliferate judgment, let's say. When you have pain, you say that's bad. But it's not just pain. We do that about when someone says something to us. If someone calls us a nasty name, or even just says something that we don't like, or is talking even too much, we interpret that as negative. This is considered to be crooked. So meditation is the practice of straightening the mind. It's not doing anything, it's just making it straight again. So you just experience it as it is. And that takes work, because you can't say that your mind is naturally straight, is naturally going to not judge things. Our mind is inclined towards judging, and to change that requires work. So I often have to encourage people to think of it that way, and to really ask themselves, do you really believe it's that easy, that you can just sit down and become enlightened? And encourage them to try working to straighten your mind, and try using the mantra. I mean, the whole philosophy of Buddhism is come and see. We don't need you to believe anything. Come and see. If it doesn't work, then go away. Obviously, we're wrong. We're frauds. But we're so confident because we know that it works, that it's scientific. You come, you see, and we guarantee the right results 100%.
So can you explain to us sort of how different your life is to maybe somebody who goes to work and does a job and come home, has a family, buys shopping? I mean, I'm not saying you don't do any of that, but what is your life now than when it used to be, when you weren't a Buddhist monk and you were, is it Noah Greenspoon?
Yeah. Well, one thing that I've always had in my mind, and so this is kind of individual, I can't say this for everyone, but I always wanted to help people. And I always loved being able to be there for someone when they had a problem. I wasn't necessarily very good at it, but it's something I really got off on. And so when you ask me that, immediately I think, well, I'm able to help people. I'm able to, and maybe more generally, I'm able to do things that have real meaning, and I'm able to do them without charging people for them. You know, I don't have to charge money for the things I do. I don't have to get involved in worldly affairs. I don't have to take sides in anything. I don't have to get sidetracked by so many things. I'm able to immerse myself completely in what I believe and what clearly appears to be something that is good for the world and for myself. You know, just it's kind of a blessing, or it feels like a blessing, being able to live the ideal life, a life where you can do good and not have to worry about any sort of meaninglessness. That's the difference, because many people are in jobs not working for something that they truly believe in, but working because they have to live and to support generally their habits, their lifestyles of having a family, having kids, having desires, and providing entertainment and so on.
Do you miss any of that? I mean, the family
I can't
life.
talk too personally about myself. We've got rules about bragging or so on, talking about our own spiritual attainments. But it was really hard in the beginning. I was a musician, and one of the first things I did was give up my electric guitar. I had a very expensive electric guitar, and give up my whole music collection. And there's two levels here. Desire is habitual. It's something that doesn't go away just because you realize that it's causing you suffering. If you're addicted to something, an addict realizes that they've got a problem. So the first thing, but it doesn't mean that they still don't have the addiction. So it's two different levels, right? So I realized that this wasn't actually making me happy. There's no actual satisfaction that comes from listening to a great song, for example. When it's over, you don't get anything. You haven't gotten anything from it. It's gone, and you need another song, and new and exciting and varied and so on. And all entertainment is like that. If you don't realize this until you watch yourself. But once you watch yourself, suppose you watch a wonderful movie, there's those moments where it's just wonderful and exciting or dramatic. You know, this upswelling of emotion because of the chemicals in the body. But as soon as it's over, it's gone. Nothing. You gain nothing from it. And all that you gain is a kind of an addiction where you really like movies and you want to watch another one or want to hear another song or whatever it is. If it's food, if it's sexual intercourse, whatever it is, it cultivates the addiction. And so the first step was realizing that. And was it difficult to give it up? Absolutely. But you see, it's a difference between being addicted and wanting to be addicted. I didn't want to be addicted to these things anymore. I realized it was, first of all, it wastes an incredible amount of your life and time and energy chasing after them. And second, it doesn't actually make you a happier person. It makes you less patient. It makes you more irritable, more susceptible to boredom, and really, if you really get into it, it makes you kind of a miserable person. If you're really obsessed with pleasure and entertainment, it doesn't make you a better person or a happier person.
Okay, so I'm just going to, I think we may have some questions coming in from viewers, but I just want to ask you one more before we go to that. So you said before about the past and being a musician, and you're talking about sort of a meditation to bring yourself into a particular state, and I just wanted to get your view on so the use of drugs by people who want to get themselves into a higher state of consciousness, if you like, which is something that happens a lot around the world, and people use that to make themselves feel happy. Are you saying that don't do that and do meditation because it's got more of a long-term benefit? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, no, I think there's a better question than drugs that make you happy. The question of drugs that claim to bring enlightenment or claim to open your mind, right? Opening the doors of perception. I get a lot of questions like that. I used to do what do you call them? Psychotropic, psychoactive? I can't remember. But drugs that mess with your mind. Specifically, psilocybin was the one I really enjoyed. And it was quite profound. I'll admit that it gave me insight into the potential for mental discovery. I remember having these profound experiences. The thing that eventually turned me off of it was the knowledge that it was fake. The knowledge, or not that it was fake, but that my ability to perceive things differently and more broad and more profoundly was chemical. It wasn't natural. And I think that is sort of the general answer that I would give. The thing about meditation is it's something that you create from a balanced, centered, natural position. It's not something that you force. So because of that, it's strong. It's rooted in reality. It's something that you can depend upon. Drugs really aren't. That's without going into the idea of whether the sort of enlightenment that people claim from drugs is actually real. Because I'd also throw some kind of, or I'd be skeptical as to that as well. I mean, the sort of realizations I had when I was on drugs were way out there, certainly, but they're nothing like the sort of grounded realizations about, for example, the nature of pain. It would have never taught me something like, oh, pain isn't really a bad thing, it's just an experience. So not really practical. Mind altering, mind expanding, sure, but enlightening, I really don't think so. Because enlightenment really is just a realization about the nature of mundane reality, the nature of all reality, including this here in front of us, and being able to see it objectively. I don't think drugs make you objective, not to the level that we're looking for.
Okay. So a question coming in from somebody watching. They are asking basically, how has YouTube changed your life?
How has YouTube changed? Well, I guess it has, yes. I started doing YouTube videos, I think, in like 2007. My mother sent me an email once and said, hey, if you heard of this thing called YouTube, you should check it out. And I'd heard about it, and so I went on. And I was looking at it, and I got a sense of what it was. And I had this little phone with a camera at the time, way back when that was kind of a new thing. And so I put it down, and I recorded my first video on how to meditate just with this crappy little phone camera. And uploaded the video. It was just uploaded to YouTube. It was 10 minutes long. And I think in like an hour or two I had 100 views. And it just hit me. 100 people just watched my video, and of course that's not huge anymore, but it said something to me. And so I did a whole series, and that was my first series on how to meditate. It's YouTube, I guess it is YouTube that has really given me that sense of the potential of the internet in a good way. You know, I mean, people talk. There's a debate about whether the internet is actually good for society, and a lot of people think it's maybe just a means of brainwashing us or keeping us from living real lives. But when you see the good side like that, because there's all this information that we have in Buddhism, in my case, that really just needs to be told. It doesn't need to be argued or convinced, or you know, it doesn't need to be argued or impressed upon people. It just has to be put out there because people are looking for it, and because it resonates in its natural purity. And YouTube, so YouTube just gave that platform to present the information, and that's what it feels like. There's just this information that just needed to get out there is now out there, and there are, as you say, 5 million views at this point of the things that I've put out there. I've got 20,000-30,000 subscribers. So it changed my life. I'm more active on the internet, or I'm far more well known because of my YouTube presence than for any other reason. It's I guess it's made me who I am, and in terms of my job and my livelihood. Personally, I guess it hasn't changed me much. It's personally just kept me busy, I guess.
So a question from Neck, who asks, why did you become a Buddhist, and did you consider other religions like Islam?
Like Islam?
Mm.
No, I had no interest in theistic religions. I grew up I grew up Jewish, and I guess I was never really drawn to Judaism except as a culture. Judaism keeps people Jewish. Personally, it kept me interested just because of the culture, because it's nice to get involved with the Jewish culture and so on. And there was even a period where I felt like I was talking to God. I had a personal conversation, a personal dialogue with whoever it is. But the whole idea of faith and it was kind of relying on something nebulous and uncertain, something that had no background in reality, it never really sat with me. I was much more interested in self-exploration and self-realization and sort of the scientific discovery and investigation. And so that's what resonated with the ideas in Zen Buddhism and Taoism, because it was much more about opening the mind and cultivating understanding from the grassroots, not from the top down, where you start with the ultimate God and then you start to create the world around you. It was more from within, and starting from the world around you. And if that eventually came to God, I wasn't atheist, I don't think, until I became Buddhist, but I was never really interested in the ultimate God. I was more interested in the source, which was my own mind. So
we'll get another.
Yeah.
Sorry,
it's not quite a full answer.
We'll get another question.
Yeah.
But I just want to sort of follow on from that one. Basically, there was a question floating around before I didn't get to answer it. But could you just sort of briefly tell us a bit about the robes and the color and sort of what the background to that is?
Mm-hmm. There's not much of a background. I mean, there's different colors that they use, and they don't mean anything. It just kind of has to be kind of this color. It can be darker, it can be a little bit lighter, but the idea was to make some kind of, it was just what was the easy dyes that they had at the time, and something that wasn't flashy. The design of the robe is just a sheet, it's a rectangle, and it's also cut up into pieces just to make it not valuable, because a large piece of cloth, of course, has value and could be stolen, and also would kind of make you attached to it. So they cut it up into pieces and sewed these patches together, and that's about it. Robes aren't... I think people give them more significance because they look kind of strange than they really have. They're not meant to mean anything except something that is worthless and yet useful. Useful to keep you warm, useful to keep the bugs off, and so on.
Okay. Question in from Heineken 100, who asks, basically, what would be a way to calm down other than meditation?
Well, it's kind of like asking what would be a way to fix the mind, to fix an engine without opening the hood, right? Meditation is just a term that means working with the mind, really. I mean, that's how we understand it. And that the word meditation is dangerous because it's taken on certain connotations where it only means this, but it doesn't really. Whatever the concept is that we're talking about, whether we use the word meditation or not, it refers to tinkering with the mind or working with the mind in some way. And so there are various ways of doing that, but you can't really hope to calm the mind in any real way without practicing meditation. Okay, unless you have the idea that fixing the body somehow fixes the mind. I guess I wouldn't entirely discount that. So the only other option would be to take drugs. They have these antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications and so on. But we've seen how poorly they've done. So, but yeah, apart from meditation, because like chanting is still a kind of meditation. Anything that works with the mind, that trains the mind, should really be understood in the same sort of as a kind of a meditative experience.
So other than meditation, I mean, there are other ways that there are other techniques, if you like, that people use to calm themselves down, to sort of repair themselves or rejuvenate themselves, and that doesn't include meditation. That maybe includes going to the doctor and being put on some kind of medication.
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's the only one I can think of, because if you're talking about taking a walk in the park, well, I would say that's a kind of a meditation. But specifically, sure, you have the alternative of going to the doctor and getting drugs. I think people should do some of the research on those sorts of drugs. They do seem to have some immediate positive benefits. The ones that keep the system from reuptaking serotonin, for example, keep the serotonin in the bloodstream or whatever, and so keep you calm. But the long-term effects is kind of like a band-aid solution, because meanwhile the mind still has the bad habits. It's just not, you're just not getting you're not experiencing the results of your bad habits, because the fruit of it is being suppressed by the serotonin. So over the long term, I can't see how it could be truly beneficial if you don't. Now, the way they'll use them, I think, is in conjunction with some kind of a cognitive behavioral therapy or meditation, something to change your habits. So could they be useful in a sort of a secondary sense, kind of as a side, something to what do you call it? Something to help you while you're dealing with your issues, make it easier to deal with your issues? Sure, I'll admit that. I think some people have used them effectively in that way. I think the problem would be our dependence on them. You absolutely shouldn't expect them to cure you. There's no chemical cure, and I don't think anyone really believes them to be a cure, but the way they're used now, and I think used effectively in some cases, as kind of a band-aid until you can actually cure the illness.
And what do you think about sort of therapies? So that people go to therapists to help themselves or psychiatry or things like that. That's not meditation, but it's something that people use as a, oh, I have a problem from the past that I've not dealt with.
Well, it kind
I
of
don't
is
think meditation's for me.
meditation. From our point of view, it would be kind of like a guided meditation. Like the therapist asks, "How do you feel?" Well, when someone asks you that question, what do? You look at your mind and see how you're feeling, and that's a very Buddhist thing to do. To ask yourself how you feel, and to be objective about that feeling. When you say to the therapist, "I feel angry," that's very similar to the meditation that we do. Just saying to ourselves, or admitting to ourselves, "I feel this," instead of saying, "I'm such a bad person because of my anger," you just say, "I feel angry." And therapy has kind of caught on to how useful that is to help the person to untie these knots that we tie ourselves into. No, meditation is just much more concentrated and intensive in the sense of moment to moment you're doing that to yourself. You're saying, "I feel this, this." So very similar. I would say in general, the closer therapy gets to Buddhist meditation, the more effective it will be. And I think many therapists realize this and are starting to incorporate Buddhist principles into their therapy. I think it's a common thing nowadays.
Okay, a question from Jacques in your box, who asks, why identify as anything? It just creates boundaries.
Absolutely, I agree. Why identify as anything? I mean, on a conventional level, it works. If someone comes up to me and says, "Hey, are you a Hare Krishna?" I say, "No, I'm a Buddhist monk," because if he thinks I'm a Hare Krishna, then he gets the wrong idea, and so correct identification can be useful. Also, if people think I'm a Hare Krishna, then they think, "Oh, this guy supports the views of the Hare Krishnas," and that kind of promotes their views. And I think, well, that's, from my point of view, not a good thing, because I'm not really supportive of the Hare Krishna movement. So I'd rather people, on the other hand, if they recognize that I'm a Buddhist monk, they think, "Oh, look, there are Buddhist monks in the world," and that makes them interested in Buddhism and meditation, and I think that's a good thing. So conventionally, identification can be useful. It's just when it becomes an obsession, and when you say, "I am a Buddhist monk," and you feel proud of it, or you feel attached to it, or on the other hand, if you feel depressed by that or upset by that, "I'm too fat, I'm too short," etc., etc. "I'm a loser, I'm a wimp," and so on. "I'm stupid, I'm ugly." Those kind of identifications are the real bad ones. But conventional identification, I think, is quite useful in many cases.
Okay, another question. This one's from Benny Bascoro Jatisari. If everybody wanted to be a monk, how can we have our next generation?
It's an awful question that I get asked far too often. There's what if.
And I'm sure you have the answer.
Yeah. Well, it's never going to happen, obviously. But from a Buddhist point of view, you have to understand what you're talking about. First of all, the simple answer to your question is, so what? Buddhism doesn't accept the idea that there's anything beneficial about the next generation. Why could there be? In billions of years, I don't know how many millions of years, the Earth is going to burn to a crisp. There's, who cares about the next generation? I mean, okay, if it comes, it comes, and let's do our best to make it a good one. But we're not going to say, "Oh my gosh, if we do this, there's not going to be a next generation." There's no intrinsic benefit there, because you see, the next generation is this generation reborn, right? So, and that points to the other argument, the idea that why it's never going to happen is because if suppose somehow all the human beings on the planet became not Buddhist monks, because there's a whole system. There's the Buddhist monks, there's the lay people who support them, people on different levels of spiritual determination. But suppose they all started shifting towards monkhood and towards enlightenment. Well, they would pull all of the beings that are attached to them up closer to that ideal of being an enlightened Buddhist monk. And so all the animals, all the rodents and the insects and all the beings in other realms, like the hell realms and the ghost realms and the heavenly realms, would also come along and be born as humans. So you would get this never-ending stream of beings. There's no sense that beings are finite, or that it's something that you could ever force to go in one direction. There's kind of a balance in the universe, this cosmic cycle of recreation. So it's just not a fact. It's not a possibility. More people become monks, well, then there's more people supporting them, and more people supporting them and them, and it shifts in that direction. But eventually it shifts in the other direction, and fewer people become monks, and eventually the monastic lineage is wiped out. Reality just doesn't work that way. Many people become monks and find it impossible and disrobe after a month or a year or even 10 years. That's just not going to happen.
Okay, thank you. A question from Art Ramke, who asks whether you've heard of Eckhart Tolle, and what do you think of his teaching?
I try to avoid questions about what do you think of this, what do you think of that, because I don't generally. Yes, I've heard of Eckhart Tolle. I haven't read his books. The whole idea of now, apparently, he believes in the idea of now. That's a very important concept, so I congratulate him on that. I'm sure he's doing wonderful work for people. I appreciate anyone who's trying to help people and make their lives better, especially selflessly, where they're not trying to make money or get rich or famous or so on as a result. And I think that he's hit on something very important, if that's actually what he's teaching, the idea of now. Can't stress enough how important now is, and how important it is to be here and now, and not... it's the most powerful advice that I can give to meditators. When someone is struggling in the meditation, it's almost always because they're in the past or in the future. They're not here and now. So I guess, not besides just now, the here and the now. Being where you are, not trying to be somewhere else, being at this moment, not worrying about the future, not lamenting about the past. This is probably the best advice that you can give. Now, how you do that is another issue. So we have our opinions of how you honestly, genuinely stay in the present moment, and I'd imagine that his are probably a bit different from mine, but probably leading in the same general direction. So good for him, I think. I mean, I've never actually read his stuff.
Okay. Another question. I didn't catch who it's from, so I apologise if it's yours. But what do you think of the connection between mind and cosmos? Which is from Hayros.
Any idea what that means? Does that mean like astrology, whether the stars affect our lives, or what?
Yeah, I mean, sort of, what do you believe there to be any kind of sort of connection there? Sure. Between mind and cosmos?
Sure. I mean, I'm generally of the opinion that the cosmos is created by a mesh of all of our consciousnesses, and all consciousnesses come together, and when they collide and when they interact, they're creating a patchwork universe. And so I'm of the opinion, if what will never happen, everyone became enlightened, the universe would be gone. It would slowly start to, the fabric of the universe would slowly fall apart. So in that sense, I'm of the opinion, and I have nothing to back it except my own experience, that everything in the universe is absolutely interconnected. And so the idea that the stars, for example, like astrology, could have some validity to it makes sense to me. I wouldn't put much faith in it, not overly, but I'm always interested to hear my own horoscope. It's kind of fun. That being said, it's not really important, because who we are, and from a Buddhist point of view, that's all just the games that we play, the stories that we tell. The universe is just a collection of all of our habits and desires and addictions and aversions. It's all a creation based on mainly ignorance, just wandering on, with no real sense of reality or truth. So once you become enlightened, you don't have any interest in the idea of the cosmos or astrology or even your future, right? Because you're here and you're now. You're taking things as it comes, and you're kind of unraveling that complexity of your life. Life becomes simple and real and here and now. The universe, I think, shrinks quite dramatically in a good way. You're no longer in the sky. You're no longer caught up with thoughts and concepts.
Okay. Craig Willis asks, who was your teacher in Thailand? And have you ever met Argan Bram?
My teacher in Thailand's name is Ajahn Tong Sirimangalo. He's got a new title, which is I forget now. Dhammamangalajan. Dhammamangalajan. And he's 91 years old, and he's been practicing meditation and teaching meditation. He's been a monk he's been in robes for 80 years, I think. And he's got to be the most incredible person I've ever met, by far. I've met Ajahn Brahm, and he seems okay, like a nice guy. I've met him a couple of times, but we follow a different tradition and a different style of meditation. I don't agree with everything he teaches or everything he says. I've taken issue with some of the things he's said, but I think he's doing a good job in terms of bringing tranquility meditation to people. I'm skeptical as to whether he's actually cultivating insight on the level that we would hope, but I can't say that he isn't. Anyway, just a different group and a different tradition, not my tradition.
Jamie Edwards has got in touch. This is something we touched on sort of earlier on in the interview, but he wants to know more about what were the series of events that led you to this life.
Led me to this life?
Mm.
Well, I kind of touched on that in the beginning. I did a video that maybe gives a little more detail why I became a Buddhist monk or something, if you look that up. So I talked about how as a child I was interested in why we have to die and to sort of still find some meaning to life even though it was hopeless, right? So that led me sort of on a spiritual quest of kind of rising above the concept of death. Eventually I made it to Thailand as a Taoist, and I was looking to go to China or Japan to study Zen Buddhism. And here I was sitting in northern Thailand. I had a plane ticket, I had a visa, I was headed off to Yunnan province in China, just on heading blindly into communist China looking for Taoism. And then I chickened out and got on a bus and went to this local monastery. It just happened to be 30 kilometers down the road. And that was it. Once I'd practiced a month there, my whole world turned upside down and set me on this quest, set me on this path. And I've been on it ever since. That was 15 years ago.
Okay, thank you. Lee Hammerfy has got in touch, and he asks, what is God to you?
What is God to me? God is a concept, just like me, or like self is a concept. It's not something you experience. It's something you apply to certain experiences. When you experience some great sense of love, you say that's God. When you experience some sense of peace, you say that's God. When you see something, you say that's God. When you undergo some kind of life experience, you say that's because of God. but you never experience God, just as you never experience soul or self. It's an interpretation of experiences. So in ancient times when it rained, they would say, oh, the gods have thought fit to send us rain. And if you happen to be slaughtering an animal, you said, oh, it's because we slaughtered this animal. Well, then we'll perform these sacrifices and offer them to God. And because of the way the mind works, we have this positive affirmation or something. I can't remember what it's actually called, but you only remember when something works. You're quick to discard when it didn't work. So every time you do a dance and it rains, you say, oh, the dancing like this makes it rain. And then when it doesn't work, you say, oh, well, there must be a reason, and you kind of put it aside. But you get excited every time it works, and you start to believe it. And so God is of that sort. The reason people believe in it is because of our desire to believe, our desire to have some kind of supportive entity or supportive force out there. But to me, it's just a concept. It's an abstraction, like the self. It doesn't have any real benefit. The benefit that comes from the quality of faith. Faith is something that supports the mind. Faith in anything. If you have faith in a rock, then that faith in that rock will support you. Like Dumbo, who had faith in this magical feather, it allowed him to fly. It's kind of like that. I don't worry too much. I don't worry too much about God. I figure if there is a God, then he or she or it should be happy with the sort of things that I'm doing to help people. Not really a problem for me.
Thomas asks for tips on how to invite people in a non-conceptual reality.
What? What does that mean? I don't get it. Invite people in a non-conceptual reality.
Yes.
Do you understand what that means? I don't understand what that means.
Basically, how can he invite people to join in practice?
A non-conceptual reality.
Without disillusioning people.
I still don't get it. Invite people. How to encourage people to practice meditation? Is that what he's saying?
Yes, I think so.
Oh. Okay. Well, they have to really be ready for it. Usually the easiest way is when someone is suffering, because you've got their attention and they're looking for a solution. People who are on the upswing aren't looking for a solution. So it's much harder to give people a cure when they're not sick, right? Have to encourage people to look after their health when they're healthy. But there are ways. I mean, no one is perfectly happy, and even if people are happy, it's not that we're all about suffering. It's that we're about purity. So if people have no anger and no greed and no addiction and no fears and nothing that upsets them, nothing that makes them vulnerable, then they don't need to meditate. But those vulnerabilities are the reason why we meditate. And so talking to people about the things that scare them and anxiety and talking about how meditation helps in that way. The problem is most people aren't interested. They aren't concerned because they're still in a state of being able to this kind of fragile state of stability where everything is going fine or appears to be going fine. It's only when everything crashes and falls apart that they come and seek religion. So you can't reach everyone, but you try to reach.
Do you think that's right? Sorry, do you think that's sort of when people seek help through religion?
Yeah.
Is that the right way to go about when you're sort of at your lowest?
No, it's just the easiest. I mean, it's the reality of it. I mean, it sounds like we're preying on people who are vulnerable, right? And that's, of course, the thing. I think many religions do prey on people that are vulnerable, but it's only preying on them if you're trying to indoctrinate them or you're trying to convince them of something that has no basis in reality, which we're not trying to do. When you're sick, you go to the doctor. The doctor doesn't prey on you because you're sick. They give you medicine. And we claim that that's what we're doing. You can scrutinize everything that the Buddha taught, everything that we teach, and see that it's not about making you Buddhist or making you believe in the Buddha. It's about giving you a solution to your problem. Now, if you don't have problems, you're not generally looking for solutions, or it's harder to find people looking for solutions. But certainly there are people who are in a very good state who get interested in Buddhism, and that's because they want to become better people. Buddhism, the meditation isn't just to make you normal. It's to make you enlightened, exceptional. And so I think a lot of people do it for that reason. They want to become spiritually enlightened. But you can only reach those people. You can't reach people who are perfectly satisfied with sensual indulgence and really think that it's going to make them happy. Very hard to reach such people. Just a second.
Do you,
Okay, I'm on the way.
so we're just here with the Buddhist monk Yuttadhammo, just having a Google Hangout, asking him various questions. I think we've got a few more minutes for questions to be asked, and we've got another one coming in from SPN then Zoo, who is basically asking for advice for people seeking enlightenment.
Well, first of all, get a realistic understanding of what enlightenment means. It's not something up in the sky or out there like heaven or some transcendental thing. Enlightenment means shining light on your mundane reality, shining light on your problems, and understanding everything about your reality or reality, so that nothing can hurt you. Becoming invincible through wisdom and understanding. How to do that? Study, understand, study reality, study your experience. This is what meditation really should be. Should be coming to understand the truth about your body, your mind, the truth about seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking. That seeing is just seeing. When you see something bad, there's nothing bad about it. That's your own projection. And coming to change that so that you're objective and really just experiencing. You have to practice meditation. There's no way around it. Read my booklet on how to meditate. What I encourage people, if you're interested in what I do, I wrote a booklet that is really just passing on information that was given to me, and it's really all you need to know to get started on the path to enlightenment. The booklet is called How to Meditate, A Beginner's Guide to Peace, and I'm pretty sure you can just Google that.
Okay. Light Force is asking, achieving world peace. So there's a scenario where you've achieved world peace and enlightenment. Is that actually possible?
I don't know. No, not reasonably speaking. As I said, I get the sense that there's a balance to the universe. The universe is shifting. Sometimes it gets better and nicer. Sometimes it gets worse and really an awful place to live. But the universe and the world is a construct of the type of people in it. So if the people get better, then the world gets better. But the world also changes. If all beings were to become enlightened, I would bet that the universe would look a lot different. Well, the universe would just disappear, as I said. But if people became even close to enlightenment, I don't think that we would have an Earth. I think it would be a much different sort of fabric of reality than we see today. It would be a much purer, a much healthier, a much more peaceful. It would just get more and more peaceful until there was perfect peace and happiness and freedom. So it wouldn't be the Earth, you see. You wouldn't have a globe of people who lived to be 100 years and then got sick and died. It would be much different. It would be the fabric of reality would be different. So the world as it is now is this way because of the state of people's minds, like intrinsically, I would say. And so you're not going to get a world like this with peace. It just isn't in the nature of the world.
A question from Mark, who asks, what can meditation do for illnesses like depression?
Mental illness is exactly what it's designed to solve, because depression is a loop. You get into this loop, and it can be, part of it is organic in the brain, but a part of it is your mental reaction. So you react to your thoughts, you react to your experiences, and you create a feedback loop, a habit. Meditation is about changing those habits. When you think of something that would normally make you depressed, instead of saying that's depressing, you say that's thinking. And as you remind yourself that's thinking, eventually you can, slowly, you can change your habits. But any kind of mental illness, depression's a tough one because it's deeply ingrained and it's debilitating. But still, with effort and with persistence, patience, it's not really that difficult to deal with. Once you come to see that.
Do you think though? Sorry, do you think that there are things that may cause depression that need more than meditation? I'm talking about, I suppose, things like therapy, things like just talking it out and sort of processing it in different ways.
You know, that cure depression. Well, meditation, as I said, is just a means of talking it out, but it's doing it with yourself, and it's doing it on a deeply real, fundamental level. So to talk it out with your therapist is really to generalize and to just get a general sense and a vague and muddied understanding of it. But to get deep in there and see it moment to moment, how a thought leads to a judgment, leads to a depression, leads to a systematic change in the body and in the mind, which leads again back to the thoughts and loops you over and over and over again. To see that and to break it up on a momentary basis is far more beneficial, is order of magnitude more helpful. It's the same concept, but instead of just making you feel good, it actually goes in there and changes the workings of the hard drive, or the hardware.
Do you have a list of things that you'd say that meditation helps cure or treat?
I don't think it's
sort of common things that you think.
Ultimately speaking, meditation will cure everything. It'll cure all physical ailments as well. And I've got called out on this. I say, meditation will cure cancer and so on. It will, just might not do it in this lifetime. So it might take multiple lifetimes for you to overcome all of these sicknesses. But because it purifies the mind, it also purifies your reality. And it leads you in a good way. So if there is an afterlife, it will be a purer, more peaceful next life or next reality. So ultimately speaking, meditation will cure even physical ailments. It can even cure physical paralysis and so on. Maybe not in this life, but it'll keep you from ever falling into it again.
Do you think that's quite a difficult thing to predict? I suppose maybe there might be some scientists who say that is not possible.
Oh, there certainly are some scientists who say that's not possible. The whole question of rebirth is not really what we should get into. Obviously, that's not what was being asked here. They're asking in the immediate reality, right? What can be fixed? But the idea of rebirth is interesting. It just means that you never die. Reality continues on. Reality is based on experience, and so when you die, that experience continues, and it continues on based on the causal relationships that led up to it. So as you can see in this life, meditation changes you. It purifies your mind. It actually helps your body in a lot of ways, lowers your blood pressure, cleans out a lot of the excess stress and tension in the body, just in this life. And so the idea is that just continues on. But in the present moment, things that immediately are affected are mostly concentrated in the mind. But one thing that you notice right away is the tension, as I said, that leaves the body. And tension in the body is a contributing factor to many kinds of sickness. So if you have cancer, I would suggest, I don't have proof or evidence, but I would suggest that simply the ability of the body to function in a more natural and stress-free manner can't but help to fight off such things as cancer. Let's not maybe go so far, but say in general, certain physical ailments will be not cured immediately, but can be helped and have been. There are lots of cases where people went to meditate, and because of the freedom from the tension and the flowing of the body, they felt so much more healthy and better able to fight off disease. The immune system, there are studies that show that the immune system is greatly or is somehow improved by meditation, that kind of thing.
Okay. Question coming in from GumGum921, who asks, what are the Buddhist teachings that are on idolizing individuals and events?
I don't understand.
I suppose in regards to a sort of so it's kind of like, I suppose, putting people on a platform, like, I mean, you sort of mentioned it before about sort of celebrity life and things like that. So are there any teachings about sort of putting people on a pedestal in that regards?
Right.
Or is it sort of, are there not?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head, but in general, it's a well, there's talk about teachers and being careful, because it's easy to take someone to be something they're not and get the wrong impression. There's a sense of being cautious. It's mostly focused on meditation teachers. When you take a meditation because we're not really that involved in society. There's not a lot of Buddhist teachings that talk about how to live in society. There are some, but they're much more general. But in terms of idealizing a teacher, there are teachings about taking your time and being discerning. Don't be gullible and just think, wow, this person must be enlightened. Be open-minded. I got an email from someone recently who's been following a fairly famous Buddhist teacher, and she sent me an email to talk about how this person totally disappointed them. Just one day, out of the blue, started arguing about something and with her, and really showed his true colors, that he was kind of a mean and bitter individual. And we talked for a while. We corresponded for a bit about how that happened to me as well. I had a teacher who I was totally faithful towards, only to find that he wasn't the person I thought he was. So certainly there's teachings of the Buddha about that sort of thing, how it's easy to get the wrong impression of someone if you're not if you're not objective, and if you're too impressionable.
Okay. Just a few more questions. One of which is from Palo Dinich, who asks, do monks seek new knowledge, and why or why not?
Absolutely, I think they seek new knowledge, but not all kinds of knowledge, because knowledge is infinite, and we don't have time for that. They seek knowledge that is useful, knowledge that helps them to become better people and become more pure and more spiritually enlightened. They wouldn't seek out knowledge just for the sake of knowledge, because that's a pretty poor reason. I mean, a lot of people seek that out because of the excitement and the pleasure and the sense of accomplishment it brings, but that in and of itself is addictive. It doesn't actually satisfy. It makes you egotistical often. You start to get proud of your knowledge, and so not always good.
Okay. Bad Teddy asks, do Buddhists think other religions are wrong?
For the most part, yes. I mean, it's not a matter of other religions being wrong. It's a matter of being something that disagrees with Buddhism. If another religion says X is true and Buddhism says X is false, well then of course we think they're wrong. But that's it. We don't have a sense that you're wrong because you're Christian, you're wrong because you're Jewish or so on. It's a sense you're wrong because you say something's right when we say it's wrong. You say something's wrong when we say it's right. That's all. We agree with. Well, I'm perfectly happy to agree with other religions if they say the same things we do. So, I mean, I don't think there's any mystery there. But we're not dogmatic about if you're not Buddhist, you're wrong.
Okay, another question. When was your last visit to Sri Lanka, and did you find anyone practicing techniques that you taught?
I did, actually. I was in Sri Lanka, I don't remember now, 2012 I think I left. But yeah, I was staying with a monk who practiced a similar technique. Sadly, the technique that we practice has kind of been marginalized there of late. There's kind of a sense that a fairly technical argument that's kind of led people to believe that it's not really what the Buddha taught. I had a monk. See, we focus on the abdomen. So when the breath comes into the body, the abdomen rises or expands. When the breath goes out, it contracts or it falls. And I was explaining that to a monk once. He came to visit, and I said, yeah, I will focus on the stomach rising and falling. And he got very dour-faced and said, oh, well, you know that's not the Buddha's teaching. And I said to him, and then we had this kind of a technical argument. I said to him, have you never heard of the air element? I said, the air element of tension in the body, and he said, oh, well, if that's what you're dealing with, then it is the Buddhist teaching. There's a lot of misinformation on this tradition, and people are spreading that around, and it was nice that all I had to do was talk to these people and explain to them exactly what we were doing, and they were able to understand it. But I like Sri Lanka. I just think it's a pity that the monk I was staying with, I was going to say, he told me, he said, I can't really teach this technique here because people are so against it, and it's kind of sad, really. People have been taught that it's not really the Buddha's teaching, which it's a shame, because that sort of dogmatism keeps them from giving it an honest try, and if they did, they would see that, boy, it really does bring the results that we're hoping for.
Okay. Another question. Where do you stand on the law of attraction, or the power to create world experience through thoughts?
Sure, I believe it has some merit. The theory has some merit. I don't believe that it's a good path to choose, because it's just desire, Even if you're desiring for world peace, you still have expectations. You want things to be other than what they are. Buddhism is to become content. The Buddha said contentment is the greatest wealth. If you're discontent, you'll never be happy. And it smacks of discontent to me. In an ultimate sense, if that's your philosophy, then you're wanting things. Eventually you have to become content with what you have, no matter what you have, you see. And until you can do that, you'll always be unhappy.
Okay, well, I think that basically wraps everything up for this interview. Just thank you to Yuttadhammo for his time and thoughts on his work. And yeah, so if you want to rewatch this interview, it's going to be loaded up to our YouTube channel straight afterwards. We've also got more live interviews this week. Tomorrow we've got an interview with Brian Thornton, who's going to talk to us about the truth about miscarriages of justice. He's from University of Winchester. And then on Thursday we are talking to the Rainforest Foundation UK, who will talk to us about mapping rights for Indigenous people. So those are two that are coming up later this week. But as ever, with any live interviews, get in touch, send us your questions, tweet us at Truthloader, or come and watch them and comment live. Until then, we'll see you next time.
Thank you, sir.